to be your next representative in the U.S. Congress. Democrat Lori Camp and Libertarian William Henry are running to represent Indiana's 2nd Congressional District. Republican incumbent Rudy Yakum was invited to participate this evening but declined the invitation to debate. I'm Elizabeth Benyon, Director of IU South Bend's American Democracy Project and host of WNIT's Politically Speaking. The American Democracy Project is pleased to co-sponsor this debate with League of Women Voters chapters in Elkhart, LaPorte, and St. Joseph counties. This debate is being carried live, over the air, or streaming by our partner media stations, including ABC 57, WNDU, WSBT, WNIT, and WVPE Public Radio. The community sponsors for this evening's debate formulated tonight's questions in conversation with voters in their communities and our media partners. Neither the topics nor the questions have been shared in advance with the candidates. The rules for this evening's debate were determined by a letter of agreement signed by both campaigns, and they include the following. Candidates will be given 1 minute to make an opening statement, and then the questions will begin. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question, with the order of first response rotating with each new question. The candidate who answered first will be given 30 seconds for rebuttal, to be used as needed. The moderators reserve the right to extend debate on a topic by allowing additional rebuttals or posing follow-up questions, but this discretion will be used sparingly to allow us to get to as many topics as possible. Each candidate will have 30 seconds at the end of the debate to tell you, the voters, why they deserve your vote. At this time, I will turn things over to our moderators for this evening, WNDU's George Millay, WSBT's John Paul, and ABC 57's Brian Connie Bear.
Elizabeth, thanks very much. And now we're going to get to opening statements. And for that, we are going to begin with Lori Camp. And candidate Camp, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Lori Camp, and I'm running for Congress to give the hardworking Hoosiers a voice in Washington. I'm just a regular person, a wife, a mom, lifelong resident of South Bend. I graduated from Riley High School, and I have a degree in criminal justice from IUSB. After college, I worked in criminal justice, then in banking, and I'm currently employed by a small software firm in South Bend. I also, for the past 6 years, have been coaching high school diving. As a resident of the 2nd District, I haven't felt represented, and I'm running to change that. This might be the most important election of our lifetimes. We have some big issues to address. We need to preserve and strengthen our democracy. We need to restore women's rights in healthcare, and we need to pass bipartisan, compassionate immigration reform. I am your neighbor, and I am working to be your voice and earn your vote to make it to Washington.
And now we will hear from William Henry. Candidate Henry, you also have 1 minute.
Thank you and good evening. My name is William Henry. I am a proud father here in the state of Indiana, a lifelong Hoosier, and I'm a veteran, a combat veteran. And I'm an advocate for veterans and criminal justice reform here in the state of Indiana. I'm the Libertarian candidate, and being the Libertarian candidate, I stand for freedom, for liberty, personal accountability, and smaller government that works for the people. I'm not beholden to lobbyists or special interest groups. I want to protect your civil and personal liberties and grow them back, your constitutional rights, fiscal conservation, and the two major parties got us here. I'm a libertarian, and I believe that I can help direct us. We can do this together to get us back on track on the federal level.
All right, we're going to get right to the questions now. We're going to start off with the economy because that is top of mind for everybody, hopefully including our candidates. And we're going to start with inflation. The inflation rate right now is about 2.5%. That represents a 3-year low, and it is lower than the long-term average of 3.28%. That's the good news. But prices are still 21% higher than they were in February of 2020. So here's the question. Who's to blame for the continued high prices of basic goods, including eggs, juice, auto insurance, and what policies do you support to help Americans afford these basic goods? We begin with candidate Camp.
The biggest driver we know, because a Kroger executive told us so, is corporate greed. So, we need to look at this as greedflation as much as inflation. And as you said, inflation is down. It's trending downward, not upward. So the policies that have been put in place by the current administration are working. I'm a working mom. I feel the pain. I grocery shop, and I see that the prices are rising. Kind of regulating what goes on in the market, that we can help to curb the out of control inflation that we had. This could be, capping corporate golden parachutes and things like that that give executives a reason to raise prices instead of keeping them low to benefit regular Hoosiers.
Mr. Henry, you are up.
Shutting down our economy in 2020 due to COVID and other things really hurt our economy. And I think a lot of people aren't addressing that fact. We really damaged our economy, shutting everything down. We told people not to go to work, that their job wasn't essential. And to think that our current financial state doesn't directly correlate with those shutdowns, with those businesses being hurt, is malfeasance to even think that. The Federal Reserve has continued printing money, and we really need to stop sending our tax dollars overseas to all these overseas contingency operations and favored battles and warfare of our Congress people. We need to support our businesses to grow here in the United States, reducing those regulations and getting them back on track. And we need to stop controlling the market altogether and really foster a unified country that helps our businesses here in the United States.
And Ms. Camp, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yes, we had the shutdown, but we have executives testifying that they are just raising prices because they can. Somehow we have to deal with that. It's unconscionable, and it can only happen when there is no regulation. And so we do need to do common sense legislation to regulate these out of control CEOs just raising prices so that they can get big bonuses.
Well, the corporations, they grew quite a bit, quite tremendously during the shutdowns. So the corporations have quite a stranglehold on the market right now. So they are pretty much controlling the food and other things that are being out there on the market. So these price raises, yes, they are controlled by those corporations, but those shutdowns really gave them that control.
The economy is growing and businesses are expanding. They're hiring workers, bumping up pay, but high inflation makes it difficult to afford basic necessities and save for emergencies or save for retirement. Mr. Henry, we'll begin with you. What policies do you support to help individuals increase their take-home pay and also grow their savings?
Well, of course, if we balance our budget in Congress, we can have more money for things that Americans need. We're spending a lot of unnecessary money on programs and services that really aren't meeting the needs of these individuals. So I think that going in and making a lot of cuts on the government side and what we're spending on the government, and really automation and computerization and these things have taken off quite a ways. I think that those could really be used in government, and we really need to downsize our government footprint altogether to stop spending so much money. We really need to stop printing so much money because we have inflated all of our dollars into the economy, and really it's damaging the economy in the last 4 years.
Ms. Camp?
I, again, would like to see, we are a capitalist society, but we do need to have regulations to make sure that people, whether it be the government or corporations, are not taking advantage of our most vulnerable. And that's what always happens. When we talk about cutting programs, it's always those that help the most vulnerable. When we talk about people that are getting fleeced, it's always the most vulnerable. So again, common sense, compassionate legislation that can help mitigate cost. With housing, we know that they're talking about giving more money to builders to build more homes, and then giving cuts to buyers to help them afford homes. That is a good way to get us going. But again, we need to look at each area and kind of do what's best. Looking at the 2nd District versus a bigger city area will be different, and that's one of the things that I would like to see when we do legislation.
Mr. Henry, care to respond?
Those most vulnerable, we do want to protect those individuals. We do want to review the programs and assess them and make sure they're meeting the needs of these individuals. And that's where we make the cuts after that. That's where we get the feedback from the ground up rather than feeding stuff from the top down. We can really understand how these programs are working and what's not working for people so we can make those cuts and make those changes.
Here's a case where, I do agree. I wish my opponent, the incumbent, was here so that he could defend his stance of always cutting stuff for the most vulnerable. We tend to agree that we do need to look at and make sure that what we're doing is compassionate, helps the most people, which in Congress, that's what we're supposed to do, right? I should be looking at everything to do the most good for the most people of the 2nd District.
All right, thank you both for that. Let's talk housing now for a moment. According to the Federal Housing Finance Agency, home prices rose 4.5% from July of 2023 to July of 2024. And as mortgage and rent payments have grown, many communities across Indiana's 2nd District simply don't have enough quality, affordable housing these days. What's the solution to that, and what role, if any, should the government play in solving this problem? Ms. Camp, you have a minute to begin.
Oh, housing. So one of the things that we see here in the 2nd District is corporations buying up homes to be Airbnbs. I'm a lifetime resident of South Bend, and we see it in our Notre Dame neighborhoods. Some of the statistics say like 50% of the homes in Atlanta are similarly owned by corporations. So again, we need to have common sense legislation that is going to make sure that the people who are purchasing homes are going to live in those homes. The current $25,000 down payment would go, I can't imagine as a first-time homeowner what that would have done for my living situation. Or the small business giving a $50,000 tax so that you can deduct that, and that would help small builders get started, and then we can build more houses, and more houses will help with demand, and hopefully that would then bring down prices.
Mr. Henry, your thought on creating more quality, affordable housing here in the 2nd District?
I personally just purchased a home, a family residence for myself recently. It was a fixer-upper. And, the mortgage companies are not going to give you a good loan on something that needs work. And there's a lot of homes out there in our communities that need a little bit of work, that need a little bit of effort. And there are individuals who could qualify for something that could get them into that home at an affordable level. But a lot of banks will not give you a loan for a home that's not livable. And I couldn't even qualify for a VA loan because the home I moved into needed so much work. And HUD doesn't help with purchasing of these homes like this either. There's no federal help with that. So you have to own your home already to even qualify for a HUD grant and things like that. So I think that there's some changes in some programs that we can make to really meet the needs of our citizens more than they are now.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Camp, you have another 30 seconds if you'd like to say anything else.
Yeah, just that I would like to see that too. Again, the programs that we should be supporting are those that help our most vulnerable, first-time buyers, veterans, seniors, and so I would like to see more thought go into the programs that do support these folks. As he said, he couldn't get a VA loan because you kind of have to jump through hoops. So can we get rid of those hoops?
All right, thank you both.
And now let's, I think we've already touched on this somewhat, but those were specific areas. We're going to ask the general question, which is, how do you view President Biden's handling of the economy, and what specific aspects of his policies have worked and have not worked? And we begin with Mr. Henry.
I view the the whole thing is just poor at this point. And our economy has tanked since 2020. Like I had mentioned before, the shutdowns really hurt our small mom and pop businesses. They completely, a lot of places were completely eliminated during that time, and it allowed for the corporate rise and really control the economic factors in our society. So in that fact, I just want the economy to get better, and it's not been any better under Joe Biden. The pullout of Afghanistan and some of these other aspects have been completely poor and really has wasted a lot of tax dollar money, and we're sending so much money overseas to these conflicts that Congress hasn't even declared.
Ms. Camp, Mr. Biden's handling of the economy.
Personally, I think that he's doing, the policies are doing what they were intended to do. As a congressperson, we control the purse strings, right? The policies that Joe Biden had put in place, whether it be the infrastructure or the CHIPS bill, these are taking our tax dollars and putting them to work in America. My daughter goes to school in Pennsylvania, and when I drive down 80 and the interstates, I see signs. The roads are always under construction, but I see signs that say, this is because of the infrastructure thing. And that's what I want to see, because those are high-paying jobs, good jobs. They're strengthening our infrastructure, which everyone should want, makes our roads safer, makes everything safer for everyone. I mean, this is something that we all should agree on is where our tax dollars should be going. And honestly, our economy is not doing as poorly as people think. Again, it's hitting us at the grocery store, but most people that have retirement plans, they're doing better than they've ever done.
Mr. Henry.
I definitely don't see that, especially in the people in my neighborhood and the people in my family and friends. A lot of people are really suffering right now economically. And, you had mentioned on some of these executive functions, and the president's executive functions have far out exceeded congressional ability to stop these things.
The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, also known as the Trump tax cuts, slashed the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%, and it cut individual income tax rates and increased the standard deductions. Now, Trump says he would like to make his tax rules permanent and make even more cuts. Ms. Kemp, where do you stand on this? Should the Trump tax cuts be made permanent, and what changes do you recommend for the U.S. tax code?
I would like to see the tax code simplified. It's absolutely ridiculous now. I'm going to give something away here, and I'm not a great beneficiary of Trump's tax cuts, right? I'm not in that income bracket. And again, everything we do is on the backs of the most vulnerable. So when we're paying the taxes, someone else isn't. And there becomes a point where the money that you make, you just save. You don't spend it, right? You pay your hairdresser to do your hair. You give her whatever. She goes out to buy groceries. She goes out to do this. She goes out to do that. You give a millionaire more money, they're likely to not spend it. I would like to see a more fair tax code across the board. But again, we cannot just keep piling taxes on our most vulnerable and lower classes while we give the 1% a break.
Mr. Henry.
Definitely lower those tax rates, and one way to do that is reduce our spending altogether. Federal spending is absolutely out of control. Permanent tax cuts, that sounds great. If I could file my taxes like I do with my organization, if I make so much money, I do it on a postcard size. Something like that, simplifying, would be absolutely tremendous if we could make changes like that. But tax detail and the tax code goes so far, it's beyond the mental comprehension of a lot of folks to be able to understand tax code to begin with. I think we need to simplify that and stop spending beyond our means.
So I want to be clear here. Do you believe the Trump tax cuts, should they be made permanent?
Any tax cuts need to be made permanent, and we need to keep going with the tax cuts.
Okay, Ms. Camp, can you respond?
The reason that we can't file our taxes on a postcard are because of lobbyists, right? They lobby so that we have to use their software to make money to pay our tax. We pay money to pay our taxes. Again, I want a fair tax code. I want to look at every level, and you can't just say I want all these tax cuts because they go to the most wealthy among us. I think the working folks like me and most of the people I know are the ones that deserve maybe a little bit of a break, which would help with food costs, etc.
All right, we're going to turn now to another important issue on the minds of many voters, immigration and border security. 6 out of 10 Americans say that immigration is very important in determining how they will vote come November. Donald Trump has made cracking down on illegal immigration a signature issue, noting that border crossings reached record levels under President Biden. The number of attempted border crossings, though, has dropped significantly in recent months after President Biden issued an executive order facilitating quick deportations at the border, and Mexico ramped up its own border patrols. So, what is your position on undocumented immigration to the U.S.? Do we need to build more walls, increase deportations, or take some other approach? Ms. Camp, we'll start with you.
Well, we know, again, the incumbent who's not here, as a Republican, they voted against the most comprehensive bipartisan immigration bill that we've had. And that would have taken immigration out of the election, which Trump did not want. People I talked to, too, in the 2nd District, they want compassionate immigration reform. That means, much like the bill promised, additional judges, additional agents at the border, and again, working with Mexico and other countries to make sure that when we tell undocumented people that they need to go, they go. But again, the Republicans have found that this works as an election issue. One of my key points is I'm not going to play politics with our national security. It's ugly and it should not be done. I'm going to make sure, when I win, that in Congress we get this legislation passed and for once and all take care of the immigration issue.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Henry, your take on immigration reform.
Immigration has been an administrative disaster across both major parties. And there are some real administrative changes that need to be made to better support those trying to immigrate. We have electronic communications now. We have the ability to have apps and collect personal data on individuals, from fingerprints all the way to photos of them, to make sure that these background checks and things like this are conducted before these people even arrive at the border, especially in refugee or circumstances that are of emergencies. So we want to definitely make those administrative changes. We don't want people entering the country illegally. We don't want security issues. We want our administrative to be able to handle the influx of individuals and be able to process these individuals properly with the capabilities given to them.
Ms. Camp, you have an opportunity for 30 more seconds.
I would just say, I work in software, so this whole fingerprinting, doing all this before they even get here, that's so rife for corruption or to be misused that, I understand. It sounds like a good idea. But again, compassionate reform means that someone has to show up to visit a judge, tell them their story. And I don't know that I support people giving us their fingerprints in some country that we don't know how the data is going to be handled.
We're going to stay with immigration now, and the question is, does the United States need to come up with a more expedited path to legal immigration, and what should we do about the undocumented immigrants who are already here? This goes to Mr. Henry.
Yeah, like I had said, administrative changes, that's what we need to do to anticipate any influx. As Lori has alluded to, that the possibility of false information being pushed in that's just preliminary information, and when they get to the border, those processes are handled through the regular way. And those administrative changes with those individuals too, I support that absolutely. We need to be able to handle the influx of these individuals.
Ms. Camp, the extent to which we need to expedite legal immigration.
I would love to see us finally make a change that makes it, again, compassionate and quick. And for undocumented people that are already here, we have to figure out a way to let them stay. We have children who don't speak their native language, if you will, who we are threatening to deport if the other side wins. As a mother, I can't imagine. I just can't. It's inhumane. And so we need to find a way to get those that are undocumented but here, making, all of them are working either in school, at jobs. They're helping our economy. Many economists say that the immigrants are the reason that our economy is doing so well. So let's welcome them and get them settled, and at the same time, let's work on the laws that let other people in.
And Mr. Henry, you've got 30 seconds if you'd like to speak.
I would agree with working on those laws and having a hard line policy on that. These folks probably wouldn't be here undocumented had there been administrative process that handled their coming here. So I think it's an administrative failure at the border between both the major parties.
Our next set of questions will focus on civil liberties. Since the U.S. Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe v. Wade, states have been more active than ever at creating their own rules regarding access to abortion services. So we want to start with Mr. Kemp. Should Congress pass a federal law protecting or banning abortion nationwide? If so, what does that policy look like? If not, explain why. Mr. Henry.
I believe the states are handling that right now. And in the state of Indiana, the Supreme Court is actually looking at the current law as the lawmakers had made. So there's a hold on that. And things could change, and a lot of ways when it's left to the states' rights, it takes a little while to equalize. And we've seen that also with cannabis-related issues too, where it's state to state, there's a different type of thing. But eventually, we're working on an equalization across the nation where we will be back to people being able to get those procedures if they qualify for those procedures in the state of Indiana. It may change. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have to leave it to the states to decide.
Ms. Camp.
As I said in my opening statement, we need to protect women's rights and their right to health care. This is government overreach that is crazy. Where you live geographically should not determine whether you're a full human or not. I would codify Roe v. Wade to make sure that every woman has the right to do what is best for her. She could be between her and her clergy, her and her husband, her and herself, her and her family, but a group of people that don't even know her have no right to make that decision for her. I was talking to some women yesterday, and one of them who was Jewish said, this ban is against my religion. For Jewish, it's not at conception, it's at first breath. And so in Indiana, we are actually going against someone's religious beliefs to make someone else's religious beliefs the law.
Mr. Henry, you can respond.
I believe in medical privacy, and that hasn't been abided by, especially during this time with Attorney General Todd Rokita trying to bring up information about private medical issues. If there's rape, incest, medical necessity, those things need to be protected in the individual rights, and I look to protect those.
Thank you, sir. Some politicians have expressed a desire to ban some forms of contraceptives, including Plan B and IUDs. Others have argued that the government should even ban IVF, in vitro fertilization treatments, which involve the creation and destruction of human embryos. What's your position on those questions? And should such decisions be made by Congress or left up to the individual states? Ms. Camp, we'll start with you.
Again, my opponent is one of the co-sponsors of H.R. 431, which is the bill that could effectively ban contraceptives or IVF. Again, we have no business in stopping a woman from having a family or not having a family. I'm a firm believer in that a woman knows her own health best. We know in Texas, where they've had an extreme abortion ban, and in Indiana, women have died. It leaves me speechless, quite honestly. But I believe that HR 431 should never be voted on, never be passed. Women, families should have the right to choose when they want to start their family, and if they need IVF, to choose how many children they want to have. I have no business doing that.
Mr. Henry, your take?
The best way to prevent abortions is to prevent pregnancies altogether. Age-appropriate education, contraceptives, those type of things are very important for people to not ever have to make a decision to end a life at all. Educating our children and having a strong family unit and communicating with your children about these types of things also prevents that. So I'm all for the stronger family unit and the ability to have options to prevent pregnancies altogether.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Camp, you could have 30 seconds if you'd like.
I agree. We just need to educate our kids, make sure that we have contraceptives available for anyone that needs them, and IVF available for anyone that wants to use it.
Thank you, ma'am.
We're going to move on to the topic of guns now. Americans own more guns per capita than people in any other nation on the earth. Are there any federal gun laws you would like to change, add, or repeal? Mr. Henry.
I would like to see a federal constitutional carry across the United States, similar to what Indiana has issued here. That way, individuals have a constitutional right to be able to protect themselves and their family wherever they may be, in their homes or outside of their home, in their vehicle or personal property or wherever. I believe that, for instance, Elijah Dickens in July 2022 stopped a Greenwood Mall shooter as a constitutional carry individual. He stopped this individual who killed 3 other people and injured 2 others with a legal carry weapon. And things like that need to be understood, that we can't wait for a response from police. We have to be able to have good people around us take action immediately.
Ms. Camp?
I'm a gun sense candidate, right? I don't want to take your guns, but we do need to have common sense legislation. Personal story, I shop at the Southside Kroger. There's a guy, because we have constitutional carry, he has 3 guns. He's only got 2 hands. So someone, if something goes amiss, is going to get one of those guns, and someone is going to get hurt. So, if everyone was smart about it, yes, I'd be all for it. But we know that everyone isn't smart about it. Parents leave their guns unlocked, and we end up with shootings like we've just seen. So again, common sense gun legislation. I'd love to see an assault weapon ban. No one needs an assault weapon to carry around, and the guy at Kroger has an assault weapon. But again, just common sense legislation, because not all people have common sense.
Mr. Henry?
I think the guy at Kroger is just exercising his responsibility, and he has a personal responsibility to exercise that safely. And if he doesn't, there are laws that will punish him if he hurts someone, if he kills someone, if he's threatening someone with those weapons, which obviously isn't happening if he's continuously out there. So I think people need to be able to exercise their right freely without any imposure from the government whatsoever.
Thank you.
Marijuana is illegal here in the state of Indiana, but it's legal in about 3/4 of the country, including Michigan and Illinois. Ms. Kemp, do you support a change in state or federal marijuana laws? If so, what changes do you propose?
I would like to decriminalize marijuana. It's silly that if you hop across the border to Michigan, it's legal. You hop across to Illinois, it's legal. Ohio now, it's actually legal. And so again, Indiana's missing out on tax dollars. Alcohol is legal. I don't see a great difference between the two, so I would legalize marijuana on a national level, and then states could, much like alcohol, determine whether they wanted to have dry counties or not, and kind of leave that up to the states. But nationally, decriminalize and expunge records of those who have been arrested for marijuana offenses.
Mr. Henry, do you support a change in state or federal marijuana laws?
I support complete federal legalization of cannabis in all forms. And recently, cannabis, marijuana, high THC cannabis was rescheduled to Schedule 3, which still doesn't make any sense because cannabis has never killed a person. And in my studies with my not-for-profit Food First initiative, where we're trying to get the federal government, the USDA, to actually give us the raw nutritional data of raw federally legal hemp. Even Indiana has federally legal hemp. We're trying to get the USDA to give us the raw food data of the plant material and the seeds of hemp, something that they haven't been willing to do, but we're working on funding to get that done. I think smoking cannabis has been implanted in a lot of people's minds when it was a food and textile type of plant long before anyone talked about smoking it.
Ms. Camp?
I know, thanks.
All right, Brian.
All right, thank you, John. We're going to turn now to U.S. foreign policy for a few minutes. The U.S. has sent billions of dollars in military equipment and aid to Ukraine. If elected to Congress, will you vote to continue this financial support, or do you think it's time for Ukraine to stand on its own? Mr. Henry, let's start with you this time.
I feel that we need to stop funding Ukraine and all of these foreign conflicts, Israel included. All of these foreign conflicts don't have anything to do with the United States except for personal relationships and other business relationships over in those countries. I believe that the United States needs to focus on its citizens. Our tax dollars need to go to support our citizens in these programs and these services. It should be. Right now, we are not being served by these programs and services, and our tax dollars are completely being consumed by foreign countries for proxy wars that have nothing to do with the United States.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Camp, your take on foreign aid to Ukraine.
I would love to agree and say keep all our money here, but we are a global economy, and it's kind of like when you stick up for the kid that's not in your class. If we stop aid to Ukraine, Putin is going to advance. We're going to lose the Ukraine, and then what's next? Poland? We know he wants all of what was once Russia before tear down the wall. And so, it's a necessary expenditure. Would I like to look at what we're spending and make sure that what we're doing is smart and in the best interests of our relationships? Because that's what it is. It's a relational thing. So, I understand what he's saying, but in a global economy and in a global world, we do stick up for our allies, and Ukraine has been an ally, and so we need to stick up for them.
Mr. Henry, you have 30 seconds if you'd like.
As a wartime veteran, I will disagree with that. And I think that war is never a good policy at all. And supporting a war, whether with troops or with our money, is unconscionable for us as citizens to have to foot that bill.
Staying on the topic of war, a lot of Americans are undecided about how to address the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. A lot of us support the idea of Israel being able to defend itself, but remain troubled by the loss of life in Gaza. What steps should the U.S. take to resolve the conflict, and is a resolution even possible? Ms. Camp.
I wish I could say an unequivocal yes, but I don't think that's the case. This is a conflict going back not just decades, but beyond that. Israel, the people of Israel do deserve to defend themselves, but we also have to look at if they're going beyond what is defending themselves. Nobody wants to see anyone killed. I'm a mom. It absolutely rips at my heart. I want a ceasefire immediately. I want the war to end, and I want a two-state solution. And I believe right now there are two people standing in the way of that, Trump and Netanyahu. And it's unconscionable that they are doing this to the Jewish people and the people of Palestine.
Mr. Henry.
I believe in diplomacy, and I believe in peace. And I think that we can reach peace in all of these areas if we actually come to the table and talk. And I don't think that there's been a lot of that happening. Our ambassadors and other individuals really need to be bringing people to the table so we can really come together. And all these conflicting countries need to come together and be face to face and really work out these issues diplomatically, peacefully, and we need to be stewards of that, and we need to encourage that, not send our money there to continue the warfare and to continue the bloodshed. That's not what we should be doing.
And Laura, you can rebut if you would like.
As a coach, you can try and get people to sit down at the table, and it's not always going to work. The Israeli people do have a right to defend themselves, and the Palestinians have a right to not be attacked without remorse. Again, I think both sides, at least on the American side, are working to try and do this, but we have to have willing people on the other side.
And America is not only the only country involved in those diplomacy. We've got other countries who have stepped up and have pledged to work with these countries too, the surrounding countries that are being ignored by media and other things, to be able to work diplomatic in those fashions too with those other countries, the Arab countries in those areas.
Thank you.
2nd District Congressman Rudy Yakum and other House Republicans have argued that non-resident aliens, foreign businesses, and agents associated with China should be prevented from purchasing agricultural land in the state of Indiana and across the country as well, and from participating in Department of Agriculture programs that are unrelated to food and safety regulatory requirements. Mr. Henry, we'll start with you. Do you agree or disagree, and what do you think is the best way for the U.S. to deal with China?
I think that we need to continue selling China our grain like we do already. Indiana sends 70 to 80% of its grain over to China every year, and we're supplying a lot of them, and that makes up for the billions of dollars that in agriculture that Indiana makes every year and receives. That foreign trade is happening. I don't support the country having physical possession of the land, but we can send grain to them that they can buy, and continue that business aspect with these countries like China.
Ms. Camp.
This is a real issue with the rural areas of the 2nd District. When we talk to people that own land, they are alarmed at the number of Chinese that are trying to buy land. And so I would like to see Indiana farmland kept with Indiana farmers if they want. Again, selling grain, yeah, that's fine. When I have a friend that's a farmer, and she says all of their grain goes over to China to make, I think, corn syrup. So yeah, we can sell, but we need to make sure, because China does give all of their industry kind of an unfair advantage that we don't always do. We need to make sure that we're keeping the playing field fair. And again, not letting the Chinese come in and buy land willy-nilly, if at all, is what I would propose as a congressperson.
And definitely support competition in that market too, to not just earmark it all for China, but if somebody else has more money, we don't have to designate all of that as well of our grain to that particular country.
Thank you both.
All right, let's talk a little bit about subsidies and tariffs, kind of related. You just talked about a fair playing field. The Constitution gives Congress the power of taxation and policies, including things like tariffs. Those are taxes on foreign goods that are imported. Donald Trump has proposed tariffs ranging from 20% to 200% on goods imported into the U.S. Are tariffs a good way to create more U.S. factory jobs, shrink the deficit, and lower prices? Or do you think they will actually drive up inflation? What's your take on tariffs, and what would you do in Congress? Ms. Camp?
So, to understand tariffs, you have to realize that it's a tax that is put on the producer. And in most cases, that's going to be kicked back to the consumer. And so an example, there's a sugar tariff, right, to protect American sugar farmers. It ends up costing us about per person $40 a year, but it makes sure that American sugar farmers are able to grow and sell their sugar as opposed to foreign sugar producers. So in some cases it is warranted, but you have to look at it very carefully. Is it a production that we do? If you're going to put a tariff on something that we don't make yet, that's going to just hurt the consumer. If you are doing like sugar, it might be a little pinch on the pocketbook, but we are helping American farmers, so that's a plus, right? Because we're paying them, and then they create jobs and buy machinery, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very fine line between whether a tariff is a good thing or a bad thing.
Mr. Henry, your take on tariffs?
I think that's definitely going to be passed on to the consumer. It's just another tax, and we see all of these tariffs and things like that we've put on Russia. Russia just simply went to China and they got all of their stuff, so they're starting to work directly with them. So all of the fines and things that we've placed on, we've pretty much fined them out of the U.S. trade. And as far as subsidies go, I definitely don't support subsidies. Businesses and these type of things need to be able to conduct their own business outside of our tax dollars. I don't believe in supporting those businesses like that.
Ms. Camp, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal if you'd like.
When we talk about subsidies, we know that the biggest group that gets subsidies are gas and farmers. And so, again, we have to look at things we just have to do it smart. Farmers need subsidies, or sometimes they would go under. I mean, do we want our farms going under? No. Gas companies getting subsidies, maybe it's time we look at that. But, again, we have to it's a nuanced approach. You can't just start swinging a sledgehammer and hope it works.
Thank you, ma'am.
We're going to broaden that question about subsidies. The government obviously financially supports industries vital to the U.S. economy. Are subsidies like that necessary? To what extent do we need to be supporting the airlines and fossil fuel industries, including coal, oil, and gas? And we've already made mention of the farmers. Mr. Henry.
Yeah, I don't think that we need to be doing that at all. That's helping control what should be the free market. And it's not a free market if the government is adding subsidies or giving people bonuses or those type of things, incentives in certain directions. I think a lot of these really hold us back, and we need innovation. We need new stuff coming out. We need engineering of vehicles that are better at fuel economy and things like that. And we're not seeing those things right now. Those are the types of things that I would like to see. But subsidies, they're not necessary. And I don't think to any extent we should continue them.
Ms. Camp.
Again, I would love to agree, but there are just some farmers. If they get hit with a catastrophic weather event, we have to help them out. Gas, coal, things like that. Should we be tapering off? Yeah, probably, because I would like to see some money going toward research on new types of energy, right? Way back in the day, we had horses, and now we have fossil fuels, and someday else we're going to have something else. And so I would like to see the tax dollars that I pay go to advancing our civilization. Working towards science and what might be the next big thing. So again, cutting out subsidies, it's not an even playing field now, and you cut out subsidies and it's going to swing so greatly that people will go under immediately. So that's not an answer. So we have to kind of play it smart, and again, it's nuanced.
Mr. Henry, you've got 30 seconds if you'd like them.
Yeah, we just need to begin to reduce those subsidies. Wherever we can start is a start. And a start in the right direction is absolutely where we need to go. And continuing subsidies is not continuing in the right direction.
Thank you both.
All right, turning our attention now to health care and Social Security and criminal justice. What is your position on the Affordable Care Act, and what, if any, legislation do you propose, Ms. Camp, to reduce health care and prescription drug prices?
I would like to see the ACA expanded, and I would like to see the government continue to negotiate for drug prices. We pay more than any other country in the world for our prescription drugs. We have people who have to choose, or had to choose before insulin was capped, whether they were going to eat dinner or take a life-saving medicine. In a country as wealthy as the U.S., that's unacceptable. I would like to see the ACA expand. One of the ideas just thrown out is actually outside the ACA, but to have Medicare pay for in-home care for our elderly. We have to know that right now more and more people are needing health care. People are growing older, and leaving them out to hang is not acceptable. So I would just like to see advancements that help curb costs, cap costs, or help people cover costs that could keep them at home.
Mr. Henry, what legislation do you propose to reduce health care, and what's your position on the ACA?
Definitely want to reduce the government influence and operation in healthcare altogether, and stop these, like we were just talking about, subsidies and favoritism to certain corporations and businesses and big pharma. The Affordable Care Act turned into the Unaffordable Care Act for a lot of Americans. They couldn't afford their insurance after that. And for me, for a family of 5 at that time when the Affordable Care Act came into existence, turned my $300 a month payment into $1,500 a month payment. So I think a lot of people felt the squeeze on that. They felt the tax, the pressure from the tax fines and those type of things associated with that. That was overreach of the government, and we're still feeling that. We still haven't equalized out a good insurance plan for a lot of individuals that is actually affordable and meets their needs as an individual.
Ms. Camp, care to respond?
Well, the real problem is, right, before the ACA, insurance companies could not cover you. Pre-existing condition, too bad. So again, these ideas sound great if we're all really nice people, but corporations are not really nice people. So we need to make sure we have protections in place that are going to keep people covered and not let them be kicked off. And that, again, makes for higher healthcare costs. So we need to figure out how to mitigate that. And again, having everyone participate in the healthcare pool is the best way to do that.
Thank you both. Experts project that Social Security is expected to run out of money in the next 15 to 20 years. So what do we do about that? Should we cut benefits for people who have already paid into the system their whole lives? Should we raise the Social Security tax on workers? Get rid of the cap on how much income is taxed? Or do something else entirely? What do you think we should do? Mr. Henry, let's start with you.
Well, I am personally under the understanding that Social Security won't even be available for me when I'm at retirement age. So I would like to see alternatives to be able to put your money into different types of investment accounts and those type of retirement accounts like 401ks. The Social Security has so many hands in it that haven't contributed to it, that are drawing from it, that's dragging it completely down. And a lot of people call Social Security a Ponzi scheme, which turns out is what it's looking like. We put money into it, and I don't think I'm going to get money out of it.
Ms. Camp, your take on saving Social Security?
Well, I believe, so I was raised to believe to those that much is given, much should be returned. So I believe we can save Social Security by raising the cap. I talk to people every day, and they don't realize that once you make over like $168,000 and some change, that you stop paying tax for Social Security. And they're kind of amazed when I say that. And again, my heart is always with our most vulnerable. And Social Security is a way to assure that our most vulnerable are given money to live. And I don't know that there'll be, I'm only 57, and I don't know that there'll be Social Security for me, but I sure as heck am not going to throw in the towel because, I might not get it. No, I'm going to work hard to make sure that the most vulnerable, our seniors, those that need SSI, are covered, and that we do the most good, again, for the most people. That's just it. I am driven by the desire to do good for those that need it.
Mr. Henry, you have 30 seconds if you'd like.
And I do agree. We do need to protect those people who are most vulnerable in those cases. But sunsetting a program doesn't, it doesn't take away completely from those people who are actually operating within that program. It gives people more investment opportunity outside of that program to do other things and decide other things to happen with their money, to grow their money in different types of accounts.
All right, folks, we've come to the time for closing statements. The candidates have 30 seconds to tell you why they deserve your vote, and we begin with Lori Camp.
Hi, I would just like to earn your vote. My incumbent is not even here. He is nowhere. I have tried to go everywhere. have put in over 6,500 miles since I started running. I'm a regular working person, and I want to represent the regular working people of the 2nd District. For too long, the people in Congress have been bought by special interests and big money. All my donations and everything that we do is either volunteer driven, no big donors, and again, that's how I'm going to represent the people of the 2nd District.
And Mr. Henry, it's your turn.
Ladies and gentlemen, our representative isn't here tonight. They didn't expand to you why they made the decisions in Congress that they did. They are not reporting back to you in the public forums that we have been attending to as well about what's happening in D.C. and why they are making those decisions. I ask you to make a change November 5th and vote differently. Vote for liberty. Vote Libertarian. Thank you.
Candidates, on behalf of the 2nd District Debate Commission, thank you for participating in tonight's debate. The League of Women Voters, American Democracy Project, and our local media partners appreciate your willingness to share your ideas with voters in this live televised candidate event. Thanks also to our moderators, WNDU's George Millay, WSBT's John Paul, and ABC 57's Brian Conybeare. And thank you to you, our audience, for watching or listening this evening. Early voting started today. Your final chance to cast your ballot will be Election Day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Tuesday, November 5th. You can check your registration status, find your nearest polling place, and learn more about the candidates on your ballot by visiting indianavoters.com and vote411.org. I'm Elizabeth Bennion, reminding you that it takes all of us to make democracy work.